Wow, this podcast was amazing. You're really going to enjoy this. Scott Cutter, an American that graduated from college 29 years ago from Boulder, Colorado, drove in his Jeep and went to Costa Rica and never came back. Find out what drew him and what continues to keep him in Costa Rica. He's a top real estate agent with several offices, over 40 real estate agents, and he's making a real difference. I really liked his line, bad roads, good people. You're going to learn about that and much more. Take a listen. All right. So how's it going, Scott?
Everything's wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Getting towards the end of a beautiful week here in Costa Rica and happy to be here chatting with you, Nick.
So what's happened in the last couple of weeks since we saw each other in Laguna Beach?
Well, coming back, one of the things I like about going to any real estate conference, especially these realm conferences, is I always say this a lot with my team is you get out of you get out of the trees and you start to see the forest about your business, about your markets, about trends in the industry. So when I come back, I try to avoid diving in or falling into the minutia and the monotony and all the same routines in my real estate career and my business, and try to take to my agents and my team and my clients some of the big picture things and inspiration that I got at the conference. So that I've been spending just a lot of time trying to restructure my physical daily routines so that some of those bigger picture elements that we took away from the Realm Conference don't fall by the wayside, which is really common when people go to those big events.
Tell everyone when you first went to Costa Rica.
So yeah, Nick, as we were chatting, I grew up in Alabama. I went to school out in Boulder, Colorado, and I came down to Costa Rica on what I thought was going to be a 6 to 8 week hiatus right after I graduated college. I got in my Jeep and drove down here from Boulder, Colorado, and fell in love with every town I got to, starting at the Nicaraguan border. And every time I got to a place, oh my God, I'm just going to stay here. And I live now on the Central Pacific Coast. I've been living in the town of Capos Manuel Antonio now for almost 29 years. And I got here after seeing a lot of towns and something just clicked. I didn't foresee real estate in my future. I didn't have a planned destination here. And I started with some pretty unassuming survival jobs here at the coffee shop, on the sport fishing boat, reception in a hotel, that maybe similar to guys like you and people that were in Cabo or in the Baja Peninsula before explosions or waves of tourism came there. I'd had a good fortune of traveling a little bit when I was younger, Nick, and I met two kinds of people: wealthy people that go to amazing destinations once they're world-class destinations and can afford to buy the best piece of property, and the guy that lives next door to him who's just been there for 40 years. And I kind of made that decision of, let me stay here and find a way to eke it out for a while. And it's been a really fun ride.
What did you study
I
in Boulder?
studied I studied a lot of nothing. I graduated with a sociology degree, but I'll be honest with you, I was one of those guys that was pre-med, pre-law, marketing, business, and then at year 3, as the college loans started to pile up, I turned to my buddies on the football team and said, "What are you guys studying, and how many core curriculum credits do I need to be able to get out of here in 4 years? Because I can't afford much more of this." And it was
Yeah.
either sociology or criminology, and I just picked sociology, to be perfectly honest with you.
Geez, so you literally graduated from university not knowing what you were going to do. You just got in your car and drove down to Central America and stopped in Costa Rica.
Yeah, I'd love to tell people, but how did I get here? And I'd love to tell the story about how I knew when I was going to come and build a real estate career, and whether I was a visionary or just young and dumb and full of piss and vinegar and an adventuresome spirit. It's probably a little bit of both. I mean, we
Yeah.
certainly had dreams of opportunity. We'd heard about Costa Rica. It was a very young and sexy destination. But when I look back at it, now with my near 50-year-old head, and
Mhm.
think, what was I thinking at 21 to come down here, and some of the different jobs and little businesses that we've run to survive. It's certainly a combination of of vision and just some young stubborn bullheadedness and a desire to live a different lifestyle.
And at what point in your 29 years down there did you start getting into real estate?
Nick, I got into real estate. I'll try not to bore you too much with a long story, but as I mentioned, I worked at a coffee shop here. I worked on a sport fishing boat here. I was making 40 cents an hour and eating tuna sandwiches and saving up as much as I could to drink rum on the weekends when I first got here. Then I got a job in a hotel, which was a boutique luxury hotel. And through a series of events, I ended up having the chance to manage this boutique hotel. It was one of the higher end hotels here at the time, a small 9-room kind of exclusive boutique hotel. And I began to meet people that were coming here and having these transformational experiences in Costa Rica, who have these transformational experiences here in Costa Rica, and asking about how I could get here and how did you come here? And I would hold court with them. At the time I was 22, 23 years old, and I would tell them my story, and I'd tell them the stories of the other old timers here. And then I found a real estate guy who was one of the first kind of guys in town, and I would send them up to him. I'd say, you should go talk to this guy. He helps people buy real estate. And at the time I'm making, $600 a month and still rubbing pennies together to try to have a good time. And this guy's got a house and a car and a boat and they're doing this stuff. And people would go up to visit him and they'd come back an hour later and go, I bought a property. And he would call me and said, Scott, I sold these guys a property. I started to realize, wait a minute, you just wrote the contract. I sold the property because I've been holding court with them for 4 or 5 days at the pool, breaking bread, sharing stories, developing bonds. And he told me one day, he said, look, if you ever want to get out of the hotel business, you can come and work with us. And I ended up leaving the hotel business, started a career with another realtor in the area, learned the ropes, learned a lot about how I wanted to do business, learned a lot about how I didn't want to do business. And after a couple of years of making money in another firm, my wife was pregnant with our first child. I was sticking around because it was my first time in life making any real money. Right. But I knew it wasn't the way I wanted to do business. It was a lucrative opportunity, but it wasn't the way I wanted to run my business. It wasn't the way I wanted to run my life. And when my daughter got pregnant with when my wife got pregnant with our first daughter, I realized that it was time to put ethics and morals and stuff in front of the next paycheck. As you know, in real estate, I'll quit when I finish my next sale. But while you're waiting me the 30 days or 60 days, you line up 3 more sales. It's a never ending cycle. And when my wife got pregnant with my daughter, I realized I needed to take some time off. And so I had sold a spec home that I'd been building, and I was going to take a year off to help my wife raise our firstborn daughter, and did every intention of doing that. We had our daughter. She was 4 or 6 weeks old, and I'm in the living room telling people that I'm meeting at restaurants to come by the house to talk about real estate. My wife threw me out and said, go get an office. and that's when we started my real estate company with my brother, Todd.
How many years ago was that?
It's been almost 20.
Almost 20 years.
And we'll have our 20-year anniversary this year.
Fantastic. And did you always have the skill sets and the discipline to be a successful real estate agent, or was it the odd jobs that you had leading up to your real estate career that forged that discipline, the characteristics that make an agent successful?
That's a good question. I think that people skills are critical. And I want to thank my sociology degree, maybe, but yeah, naturally, I've never been great at math or great at science. I've never been a person that was that had the wherewithal. My dream was always to be an ophthalmologist. I've always wanted to be an eye doctor. But just to be honest with you, there was a cool, good-looking, wealthy guy when I was a kid. I was blind as a bat with big Coke bottle glasses, and I'm like, I want to be like this guy. Fancy shoes, nice office, nice as can be, looked at people's eyes, and then took their credit cards. I'm like, this is a job that I want. And then I realized that I don't have the patience to go to pre-med and then go to med school and specialize. I'm like, I'm going to be 35 before I start my career and living. And unfortunately, I just didn't have that that fortitude. But I always realized I was great with people. So I always, even when I was a kid in school, I remember that the smart kids took notes and got good, bad grades, and the delinquent kids were failing out of school. And I was friends with both of them, and I could find a way to get a study group together. And it just naturally, I found my way to where I could communicate with a large group of people from all spectrums of life. And real estate here just manifested itself because, and I don't know how, when you moved to Cabo, Nick, there's a lot of great ways to survive in Costa Rica. There's a lot of great ways to come with money and live a good, simple life. And there's ways to come to Costa Rica and not be in real estate and have a little business and have a mom and pop shop. And I got a lot of friends down here that I admire and try to learn from, who are maybe truer to a non-consumerist, basic lifestyle, health, mental health, nature, and they're fine with a small place to live and a surfboard and a couple of agua de pipas from the tree. And I'm not that guy. I need to thrive. I need mental challenge. It's just part of who I am. And so for me, getting into real estate was kind of combining kind of my natural persona with one of the few businesses in this small town, because where I live is not a Cabo San Lucas. This is a very small, tiny town. Is one of the few opportunities where you could actually maybe have an opportunity to build some wealth, to challenge yourself with bigger projects. So I don't necessarily with that it was my destiny, but if I wanted to stay here, I needed to find something that was going to allow me to stay here and also be challenged mentally and to have growth opportunities economically, which are just important for me.
So you started your own company nearly 20 years ago. What does the company look like today?
So a couple things. One, it's my company, but it's my and my brother's company. So there's a wrinkle to the story, which is my younger brother Todd finished his university career in Boulder. He came down on his summer break with me when I came down, stayed for 2.5 months, then went back and was miserable back in the States. Graduated, he came down to Costa Rica as well. And we worked independently for 5 to 7 years. He had his own entrepreneurial spirit. He had an online travel agency. We had a production company. We did concerts here for music fans. But we started the company together. And it was really just the two of us. And it was kind of a mutual respect and commitment of realizing, after doing business in Latin America for 8 years and spending a lot of times on the phone together, complaining about how hard it was to find people that were great, nice people.
Right.
There were very wealthy, successful people, but those people were taking some of the attributes that we were trying to get away from the States, a blind commitment to wealth and success without any kind of core value. And then we had a lot of really great, super nice core value people who I wouldn't loan $20 to. I'd give them $20, but I ain't going to loan it to them.
Right.
And we spent a lot of time just going, God, it's so hard to find other people with this balance. And so we started the business together, and it was small. It was the two of us. And one of our agents, currently one of our brokers now, actually was with us when we started the company. He's still with us today. We've evolved quite a bit. As we talked about, we battled with staying small and making more money as brokers, being more involved in just selling because we're good at what we do. We love what we do, or trying to build something that's bigger than the two of us. And we made that commitment about 5 years ago to try to grow and to bring more people in and have a marketing team. And so now we went from that little 2-person home office, him in San Jose and me in Capos. Now we have a team of just under 50 total collaborators. We have a full-time marketing staff of 7 professionals that work just on marketing and that. We've got 42 agents now around Costa Rica with offices and that serve, I don't want to say everywhere, but all of the Pacific coast. And then we have offices in San Jose that serve the Central Valley, and we hope to expand to the Caribbean coast and a couple other core destinations in the next year.
What's the real estate market like in Costa Rica?
It depends on our offices. So our Central Valley offices are kind of an anomaly because that's a primary residence. It's a city of 2.5 million people, and most of our clients are Latin Americans. We do have some expats that are moving up to the city, but it's a more standardized, typical family, people moving here. I want to change my house, upgrade market. Our coastal markets are almost entirely second, third home markets. We're seeing more and more people now looking at retirement, as we get a baby booming population, very similar to, I'm assuming, what you guys are seeing in Cabo, which is, it starts with, I love visiting here. Then you get people that, I'm going to come back all the time, owning a property. Can it rent? Will it sustain itself? Is it a smart investment? Is there appreciation? And I see myself as my kids and my grandkids, spending more time here. And for you in Cabo, maybe it's the cobalt blue waters, and it's the golf course, and it's the cuisine. Here we get a lot of people that are fishing. We get a lot of people that are into nature and wellness. But most of our coastal markets are North American, so US, Canadian buyers predominantly. We're getting more and more Europeans as our flights open up. And again, there's some similarities to you, as you see waves of new investment every time a new airline opens up a new destination to make it easy to get to. So, we have direct flights from Miami and Atlanta and Dallas and Houston. That was where a lot of investment came from. And now that we've got direct flights from California and New York and Chicago, we start to see a different profile buyer when it becomes a 4.5 hour direct flight instead of an 8 hour or a 9 hour connect through this destination. And Costa Rica is seeing more European investment now because we've got a lot more direct European flights.
Yeah. It's interesting. Did you take note at the Realm event a couple weeks ago, talking about the heaviest concentration of billionaires in the world? The number one city is New York.
Yeah.
And
it was my daughter's in school there. I'm visiting. I'm thinking about where I drop my cards on the street now when I go to New York. But that slide jumped out at me. And another slide jumped out at me, Nick, that I'll use just to self-promote, because why not? Was they talked about happiness, and they talked about wealth, and they talked about how in the United States was falling below average. They had this chart that showed kind of the wealthiest countries in the world, and then where their mean happiness was. And the USA was well below global averages in happiness. And there were some outliers that they didn't even talk about. They said, look, here's all the norms right here in the center. And there's a couple of these anomaly countries, Finland and Costa Rica were the two anomalies that were out there, where they're really poor, especially Costa Rica falls into the really poor but incredibly happy. And ultimately, that's what we end up selling. I mean, the real estate for us, Nick, I tell my clients that's the easy part. It's four walls. It's the same granite you got in Cabo, or you can buy in Hawaii. If you think that's what you're buying, I go, you're wrong. You got to shop macro to micro. So, A, make sure Costa Rica is for you. B, pick an area, because it's a small little country, but it's very diverse. And that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is, while Costa Rica is the size of South Carolina, your experience, the infrastructure, the kind of investor that's going to be happy, ranges dramatically depending on where you invest in a small little country. But once we do that job of guiding people through that kind of macro to micro level setup, for me, the real estate's almost just like,
secondary.
Are you on bus A or bus B? It's easy.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, going back to that event, there was a panel discussion with the CEO of the private jet service, and he made the same kind of statement. We're selling the experience. We're not selling jet service. It's the experience. I believe in that also, and I preach that to my team all the time, because when you can get beyond that, then you're tapping into the emotional side, and it's all emotion when it comes to a second home.
Absolutely.
What percentage of your clients are purchasing that second, third home versus primary?
I'd venture to say that, with the exception of my San Jose market, which is an anomaly in my coastal markets, it's 90% second.
Same.
If not 95. I mean, very few of my clients historically are moving here full time. We're starting to see an uptick in that. I think that and you probably do this well. When we started our real estate company 15, 20 years ago, the only people that were buying real estate to live here, or that were coming here to live, couldn't afford real estate. I mean, there was the jet set people that were coming here out on the forefront. It was like, when I got here, I couldn't afford to buy anything. I was broke.
Yep.
I was a visionary, but I was broke. We're seeing a consistent, it's not it's not radical in terms of numbers, but there's a consistent growth in the amount of people that are either moving here now or considering moving and retiring here full time. And there's a very direct corollary with the more dramatic news and life and political division and all of the BS that we watch unfolding, not only in the United States, but around the world. The more divided and unsafe and uncertain the world feels, I think destinations like Costa Rica resonate more and more and more. And so we are seeing more people. Like I never saw families moving here with their kids.
Mm-hmm. Now
And
you do.
that happens every month now, where their kids are coming out of school and we're going to move them because we think that it's a better life. And that's an anomaly. It certainly it exploded with COVID, and we're seeing it after that.
The 90% plus of your clients buying second, third homes, what percentage of those are Americans?
75%.
Okay, so just like our market's the same.
Yeah, I mean,
Very much.
I'm assuming you guys. I get bumps. There's times like when the Canadian oil dollar was so strong. I spoke with a Canadian accent for 2 years. I mean, everybody it was like, hey, and I couldn't believe. And it was the Canadians are conservative and they're smart financially. And as much as I would sometimes giggle when I would get a call, before that, the financial crisis in the States, where people would ask me if the prices were in Canadian dollars. I'm like, no, they're not. I don't know many international real estate sites that. But then when the financial crisis hit, and overextended U.S. buyers that were way more aggressive with their capital were taking a bloodbath everywhere. We were probably 60-40 with Canadian investors coming in and taking advantage of the opportunity. So we see more of that, especially with the Canadian winters. We're more seasonal with our Canadian investors that have really beautiful summers. It's incredibly long days and great temps. And when it gets cold, they'll come down. And then I mentioned as well, we had very few European buyers in the past, and we're seeing a very real uptick.
Great.
And I think a lot of it's a corollary when we talk about, it's easy to talk about the States and the political strife there, but there's a lot of tension in Europe. And the natural setting here and that laid back Central American Latin way of living is really infectious. And I'm sure you see that probably in Cabo as well.
Absolutely. It's not only warmer, but the culture and the people are warmer.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about, for the novice that hasn't visited or just went once to Costa Rica like myself, the different areas that comprise Costa Rica, especially when we relate it to either tourism or second home buyers.
Good question. I'll try to do it without being overly long-winded. But let's take the Pacific Coast.
Yep.
And you can break it into basically 4 regions. It's really 3 regions, but what probably most people have heard about, our most populated visit area is the Guanacaste region. So there's 2 peninsulas on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. There's the Nicoya Peninsula, which is the northwestern peninsula. And then there's the Osa Peninsula, which is down south near Panama. And then you have the Central Pacific coastline. When you take the Nicoya Peninsula, that northwestern province, that's where the Liberia International Airport is, Four Seasons, W, Weston, the Waldorf Astoria, the Ritz-Carlton, the Riu, the Dreams. That's where you're seeing the largest concentration of institutional investment, resorts. There's the towns of Tamarindo, Flamingo, and Papagayo, which are very popular and probably really, really forefront on the world stage. That area is famous for its beaches. They get a little bit less rainfall. It's a dry forest. It's not the rainforest. So it's a dry forest, really cool beach towns, great accessibility. So for those bigger resorts, that's really what they need. They need beautiful beaches, easy access. They need amenities, restaurants, some of the golf and other amenities there. You don't get the rich, deep rainforest that Costa Rica kind of exports as the imagery, but it's still green and it's still beautiful and still amazing. And that's that northwestern area. The southern tip of that peninsula is a little bit harder to get to. Now you're an hour and a half to 2.5 hours from that Liberia airport, or about 3.5 hours from San Jose. You can access from either one. And this is a part of Costa Rica that I kind of determined from like Samara South. So with the epicenters being Santa Teresa and Nosara, this is like the wellness mecca of Costa Rica. Huge money. Incredible wealth has migrated there, but for a different reason. It's going there not because there's golf courses, not because there's big resorts. It's a little bit harder to get to, but this is where CEOs of tech companies are going, and it's all about surf and yoga and wellness and wheatgrass and chlorophyll and their blue zones in a global sense. And you know, I took my kid there, and they're like, "Dad, can we get chicken fingers here?" I go,
no chicken fingers.
This is brown rice and quinoa, and just go with the flow. And I'm exaggerating, but it's so magical, and the wellness element of it and the connection with the ocean and surf, and yoga and mindfulness and spirituality is so strong in these towns that they are mystical in their natural beauty, and the attraction for a lot of these uber wealthy and wealthy people, New Yorkers and Cal, is very strong. From there, you move into the Central Pacific. I'm on the Central South Pacific, and there's towns of Jaco and Manuel Antonio, which are an hour to 2 hours from the other airport. There's another international airport in San Jose. We get a lot more national tourism here. The town of Manuel Antonio, where I live, there's the most visited national park called Manuel Antonio. There's a marina here called Marina Pesvela, some of the top sport fishing in the world. It's not resorty. Our biggest hotel is 100 rooms. There's 50 condos here. So people like it because there's a real town. So there's 15,000 locals and there's 15,000 foreigners, and it's rough around the edges. So I'm assuming even in Cabo, you get that experience where people will go and they want to stay at the Rosewood, but they want to go to eat, and they want to drive a little bit up the peninsula and go to where it feels local. And so Manuel Antonio and the Central Pacific offers that kind of blend, good and bad. Some people go, God, this isn't as nice as the Big Bag Resort, and it's not. There's some rougher edges, but there's a sense of authenticity here. There's some big natural beauty here, and then you also get the creature comforts because there is a lot of tourism here as well. So you get to get the best of all worlds. And then the southern part, that Osa Peninsula from here south, you get into the real rainforest that Costa Rica exports, the natural beauty that you probably close your eyes and think of. Huge waterfalls, jaguars and monkeys and all that stuff gets exponentially greater as you go south. You get more rain, and it's also harder to get to. So it takes a more special buyer, a more special investor, and a more special tourist to want to say, I'll do that 4-hour drive. I'll take that extra step. You know, we have a saying here, we say bad road, good people. Go a little bit further down the bad road, and oftentimes the experience there can be more magical if you can tolerate it.
I love that phrase. I love that phrase. Bad road, good people. So is it safe to buy real estate as a foreigner in Costa Rica?
Very much so. That's one of the strengths of Costa Rica. I think Costa Rica in general is a safe country. You know, Costa Rica abolished their army in 1949, decided to use all the money from the ejército, from the army, for medical and education. So it's a highly educated, 96% literacy rate, safe country with a really good healthcare system. And then they have a national registry system that is very transparent. So foreigners have all the same ownership rights that Costa Ricans do. There are some anomalies and exceptions, that which I'll mention, but basically the fee simple title land in Costa Rica, you, me, anyone from anywhere can come and own it in their own name. And there is a very transparent national registry system that governs title ownership. There are, in 1979, they passed a maritime law. So the vast majority, 94% of our coastlines are maritime zone, where you have concessions, 20-year to 99-year concessions for the coastal area. There are areas that are actually titled to the 50-meter line. So all the beaches in Costa Rica are public beaches. No such thing as a private beach. Private access beaches exist. And in that concession land, there is some anomalies about foreign ownership. You have to have a Costa Rican corporation that owns at least 51% of any of the concession properties. Ways around that, there's plenty of foreigners that own them, but that's an area where there are some limitations on the pure ownership rights of foreigners.
So it's important to work with a real estate professional as a foreigner to identify those troubled areas, wouldn't you
Yeah,
say?
and I would say two things. One, I don't think they're troubled areas. They're just nuanced legal areas you need to understand. I think it's important to work with a real estate professional anyway. I think realtors in general, Nick, get a bad reputation as fast talking salespeople, just like maybe a car salesman does. And I think the reality is we have colleagues, you have colleagues, not members of your company, but who deserve that reputation.
That's right.
I've had agents that want to come work for me that are great real estate agents in the States, and they want to move to Costa Rica. And they say, Scott, I'm a top producing realtor in the States. I want to come and sell. I go live here for 3 years. How can you, I have zero doubts about your ability to sell and help me earn money. I have very serious doubts about your ability to guide a client through the cultural, legal, linguistic maze, which is investing in a foreign country. And most of my realtors weren't realtors. They're local people, or a lot of them are expats, but they're people that I knew and trust that worked in a restaurant, or I know and trust that moved here on their own tourism business or ran a hotel. And I approached them about, you know what, you can learn real estate. You can learn 3-bedroom condos here, what that's worth. That's relatively simple knowledge to acquire. What you can't learn is how employment law works in Costa Rica and what to do with your maid. What you can't learn is how come this area is a little bit more expensive than that area? What are the nuances of the lifestyle here? And when you're selling international real estate to people that come on a 7-day vacation and stay in these, they live in this tequila
Bubble.
or daiquiri induced bubble. The easy thing to do is to keep them in that bubble and let reality hit them after they close, which is not a sustainable business model. At least it's not for me, and I don't think it is for you. And so I think it's important to work with a realtor always. And what I would tell people, especially in Costa Rica, especially in Mexico, but in general, you always want to work with a realtor. Always. They add tremendous value to their clients no matter where you are. And if you get the feel that your realtor is selling you something, as opposed to guiding you through a very complex and what's probably the most important process, fire the realtor.
Yep.
There's another good one.
Yep. No, it's absolutely true. There's degrees of excellence, and real estate is no different. And it's your most valuable asset that people will own.
Absolutely.
Right? And what about closing costs for a buyer? What can they expect to pay?
So in Costa Rica, it's a relatively complex conglomeration of taxes. So there's a transfer tax, and there's an agrarian stamp, and then I don't know how it is in Mexico, but here there's 74 government institutions that each make 0.016% on any transfer, which I won't bore people with. Typically, transfer taxes when you're selling and buying and selling are split 50-50 buyer and seller. Okay. And your total cost for your transfer taxes, notary fees, which are included. So there's a 1.25% notary fee included in the closing cost for your attorney. And they tend to run about 3.5%.
Okay.
And they're usually split buy side, sell side.
Okay, so a buyer and seller can expect to pay on average 1.7.
Yeah, about 1.6% of the purchase price to get through a transaction.
That's not too bad.
It's reasonable. One of the cost of doing business here is relatively low. Our property taxes we're a country, we're blessed with our location. Property taxes here are 0.25% of the registered value of the property. There is no government assessors. You register your own value, but I tell my clients, register the full value. $1 million house is going to pay $2,500 a year.
Yeah, that's cheap. It's the same thing here.
It's great. Insurance is the same thing. We don't have hurricanes, and we have earthquakes here, but we have a very strict seismic code. We've only had one hurricane in 100 years, so we're really blessed in that sense because it keeps our insurance costs really low. Insurance is about 0.25% of the replacement construction value.
On an annualized fee. Yeah, wow. That's fantastic. What are people surprised in when they visit Costa Rica for the first time that you hear consistently with your clients or friends or family that are visiting Costa Rica?
And in the interest of always being transparent, I'll tell you the good and the bad. So I think that's important. I'm not a guy that says Costa Rica is perfect. It's perfect for me. You know, and
There you go.
and it's because I know the imperfections of it, and I embrace them and understand them or tolerate them, however you want to say it. So I think the most overwhelming thing that we get is people come here because of the natural beauty. They hear about ecotourism and they envision themselves seeing monkeys on the zip lines, at the volcano, in the hot springs, surfing, everything that's just iconically exported. Everyone sees, and those experiences are amazing. And no matter how many times you see them or even do them, people just get really enthralled with life when they do all of this really cool ecological adventure stuff. So that's one. I think that what surprises people is, and what keeps them coming back, because sometimes I did the canopy tour, I've done it once. They're overwhelmed with how happy people are here. And it's funny. It's been a big draw for me. I tell people all the time, you will come for the beauty, but you will stay because the Costa Rican people are the nicest, or among the nicest, warmest hearted, truest people in the planet. And I came for the natural beauty. I didn't know. I stay here because I think that I'll live a longer, more richer life because I'm surrounded by people that have priorities in life set forth. And it's easy to say that. We all do this. And we're at the Realm Conference with 250 of the most powerful, successful, high energy driven realtors, and everybody's like, namaste and be mindful. And we're all like, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's easy to say it. It's hard to do it. And I'll tell you an anecdote that probably my father-in-law drove the ambulance for the local hospital. Poor guy. I think he's passed away, but his pension was probably $120 a month, retired. And he goes, Scott, I'm so glad that before he passed away, he said, I'm so glad that you met my daughter and that you could help her and help take care of the family and provide, and you can travel and do all these things. I wouldn't trade my life for yours in a million years. And it's because he sees the intensity that I take to my work and my business and my passion. Yeah. And that, especially in today's world, and I think you probably get the same thing in Baja, where that Latin Mexican feel and the pace of life, it's hypnotic and it's intoxicating to people that are coming from, in many cases in the US and around the world, kind of a toxic environment where there's just a lot of stress and a lot of conflict and a lot of polarity. And I think that's the most common thing I get from people is, I can't quite explain it, but I just feel better here. And they always can't put their finger on it. But I think it has to do with the people, and that's what sticks with me.
It's so interesting that the similarities in your market, in your country, the same here.
Oh yeah. It's the same elixir.
And I know you felt it when you first were there and you didn't leave, because I felt it. You get off the airplane and you smell the air and it's like, wow, this is different. And you don't know why, but it just keeps you.
You would ask me, I told you, just in the interest of being transparent, some of the negative things, I think people are surprised that it's not dirt cheap anymore.
Yeah.
We live inexpensive here. The same thing's probably true in Cabo. I can live very cheap. I don't need heat. I don't need, and if I go to the farmer's market, I eat fruits and vegetables and I eat rice and beans and I eat and live like a local, I can live very inexpensively. But if I want to go out, with the amount of tourism that's here now, if you're going out to the restaurant on the waterfront and having 2 margaritas, and a Black Angus steak, it is not the cheapest place on the planet. So that's one of the negative things that I'll hear people like, I didn't realize how expensive it was. And I go, it can be. And I think the key to knowing your life here, and the same thing I know is true in Cabo, because you can go spend $1,000 on an hotel, or you could probably go and eat, some really great local food. Knowing that balance, and one of the things we try to do is guide clients. And look, don't come here and think that because you're moving to Central America, unless you've got the bankroll, that you can go out and eat out at every single meal at the finest touristic restaurants every night, because that's as expensive as going out in Chicago or Atlanta or Miami every day.
That's right. Yeah. Scott, I appreciate your time. This has been very fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I look forward to hopefully you visiting my neck of the woods, or me coming back down to Costa Rica. And everyone, if you're interested in real estate in Costa Rica, Scott's your guy.
Let's make a promise on both of those, me visiting you and you coming down here.
All right, Scott, take care. Good talking to you.
Take care. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Nick.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nick Fong Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Ronaval Real Estate and follow Nick on Instagram at NickFong_Ronaval. Ready to find your Baja dream home? Check out the latest property listings at ronaval.com or findmexicohouses.com. Hasta luego.